losing their ability to sleep at night. Eyes were black with no pupils.
This program was made possible by contributions to your Hayden_IRL station from viewers like you.
When it comes to Pokemon, my favorites have to be Jigglypuff and Wigglytuff. When I was a little girl, I had a dream of having a puffy Jigglypuff. I even used to have a bunch of Jigglypuff and Wigglytuff plushies. They would surround my pillow, and each night I would cuddle with a different one just to make sure they each got some love. Anytime my Jigglypuff or Wigglytuff used Sing, I would hum the little tune with them, thinking it made my chances better for the opposing Pokemon to fall asleep. I was very naive back then, but it was blissful innocence to be honest. Hell, I even played Jigglypuff in the Brawl games. I didn't care if anyone else didn't like her, I did. So when I got my hands on Pokemon Soul Silver when it first came out, I, of course, made it my mini mission to find a Jigglypuff and Wigglytuff. I went through the game, waiting for Puffs and Tuffs to show up. I encountered the occasional trainer with a Puff or Tuff, but I soon found out Jigglypuffs could only be caught in one set area, which I later found to be the game's Safari Zone, and Wigglytuffs couldn't be found in the wild at all. At that point, Safari Zone was not active for me, so I was stuck waiting a little longer to capture my beloved Puff. After a week or so of battling and schoolwork, Safari Zone was finally available. I went there once I had a chance to go and went on a hunt for Jigglypuff. And of course, it was not easy. I ran into maybe 8 the first trip and lost all 8 of them. I remember calling my DS Lite a cheater. Next day though, I finally caught my first Jigglypuff. I happily named her June and put her in my party ASAP. It took some time to get her up to the level of the rest of my team, but it was well worth it for me. I even kept her Sing since it felt so nostalgic to hear that lovely tune again. Sadly, school got busy for me for a while, so I was forced to put my game on hold. But once I got my free time back, I went right back to work, making sure all my Pokemon loved me, especially my June. But I still didn't have my Wigglytuff. I didn't want to lose June, so I thought about getting an already evolved Wigglytuff, since Safari Zone has proven its dislike of me. So I set a call out on the wireless trade asking for a Wigglytuff, any gender and any level. I wasn't picky at the time, but now I wish I had been picky. In exchange for a new Wigglytuff, I put out a wonderfully bred Totodile that had some killer moves, even for a level 6. I waited for hours, thinking someone would see the quality right away and send a trade. I waited days. Maybe someone would just happen to want a Totodile to raise. Nearly 2 weeks had passed, and I still had no response. I had already given up hope and was ready to use a Moonstone on June. I ended up checking one last time to make sure, and I wanted to get my Totodile back somehow, if no one was going to take him. But it didn't send me to the main menu for the wireless trading. Instead, I got the dramatic evolving music, and a Pokeball came flying from the top of the screen to the bottom. Finally, I got my Wigglytuff. I quickly logged out to see my new friend, a female Wigglytuff level 26. The name was a bit odd though, disabled in all caps. I didn't get why someone would name a Wigglytuff that, but I had seen stranger names for Pokemon. I just wished I could have changed it, but for some reason, you could never change the name for traded Pokemon. Its information was a bit odd, but I was never one for those kind of details or learning the meanings behind them. Gloomy nature. And it only knew one move, Sing. I didn't recall ever seeing Gloomy before, but I had seen Timid, so I figured if they can be shy, they can be sad too. Though, you would have to wonder what Pokemon would be Gloomy, and the fact it only knew Sing did bug me. It would have been nice if its previous trainer left some more moves, but I had some nice TMs to try on it anyway. Despite the off information, I was eager to try out the Wigglytuff in battle. I checked my character's bag and picked the best TM I was almost sure would work. I ended up picking Hidden Power, Swagger, and Explosion. I headed over to the nearest patch of grass and walked around aimlessly looking for a fight. The battle music came on and the Pokemon was Ponyta. I picked Fight and used Sing, just to make Wigglytuff's first fight that much easier. But it failed. Well, I knew Sing didn't always work, so I didn't think anything of it. Ponyta used Tail Whip. It was cute, but only lowered my defense. My turn again, so I used Hidden Power, just to see if it was in the right place for it. I wasn't. Since I barely made a nick in the Ponyta's HP, it used Tail Whip again. I figured that the game was using the same trick the lower level Pokemon used. This time, I tried Sing again. The screen acted like it had used Sing, but there was no sound.
Sing was disabled.
I just stared at my screen. How was it that Sing's disabled? Was it a stupid trick? I let Ponyta use its Tail Whip again, but then Wigglytuff shook a bit like it was suffering from an effect. I thought I saw the sprite change, but then I realized that I probably just got a glitchy Pokemon. I cussed a bit, pissed that I lost a good Pokemon for a hacked one. I didn't want this one messing with my game, so I picked Run.
Disabled wants to fight. You could not leave the battle.
Oh, come on, I remember saying out loud. I kept thinking that it was probably about to ruin my game. I thought Ponyta was about to attack this turn, but it didn't. Its little sprite shook like it was poisoned.
Ponyta was frozen in fear. It might not attack.
I knew this was getting too weird. I tried to pick Run again, but another weird text came up.
Disabled wants to fight. You cannot leave the battle.
I didn't even see the text was different this time. I was able to pick another option. I couldn't run, so I fought. I tried Hidden Power again.
Hidden Power was disabled.
I had to pick another one, so I tried Swagger.
Swagger was disabled.
What was this doing to all of its moves? All these questions popped up in my head one after another. What did that guy who gave me this Wigglytuff do? I have to escape. I can't keep this Pokemon. I knew I could just turn the game off, but I wanted to see what was happening. I wanted to see what was wrong with my Wigglytuff. I was stuck with only two options, Sing and Explosion. Sing was already disabled from past attempts, so I was gonna try Explosion. That move would take out the Wigglytuff and the Ponyta too, ending the battle. And I thought that maybe this was a good thing.
Explosion was disabled.
I didn't even have a chance to react before more text came up.
Disabled tried using Sing. Sing was disabled.
It was doing it on its own. The sprite started shaking a bit more than before, more obviously.
Ponyta is frozen in fear. It can no longer escape from battle.
I felt my heart start to pound. Maybe this is what the Ponyta was feeling at the time.
Disabled tried using Sing. Sing was disabled. Disabled tried using Sing. Sing was disabled. Disabled tried using Sing. Sing was disabled. Disabled tried using Sing. Disabled disabled. Sing was disabled. Sing was Sing. Sing was disabled.
Each time the text passed, Wigglytuff's sprite turned dark and darker.
Disabled used Struggle.
I watched in horror as the Wigglytuff used Struggle like it had no other moves to use. Most of the time it didn't even hit the Ponyta, just Wigglytuff like it was hurting itself. The Ponyta finally fled from the battle and the sequence ended. I wished I could have gone with it. Since Wigglytuff was first in my party, it was walking alongside me on the screen. Its colors looked dirty and red could be seen on it. I turned to my character to talk to it, and it didn't say anything to me. I tried again, becoming strangely desperate to figure out what was happening to the Wigglytuff I was so joyed to finally have.
I just wanted to sing.
I wasn't sure who was talking. Maybe it was a voiceover, I thought, so I talked to it again.
Why can't I sing? Just sing, sing.
Each time I spoke to it, its cry grew softer and softer, like it was a toy breaking. I began to feel bad for Wigglytuff, and headed back to the city to heal it. It was the least I could do before I turned my game off, taking it back to the time when I just barely got it, before I had used it. And sadly, we didn't get far. We encountered another Pokemon battle, another Ponyta. I picked Run, but just like the last time,
Disabled wants to fight. You cannot escape the battle.
no one had time to react to what happened during the fight. Ponyta was too slow for some reason and was stuck in battle. The options menu didn't even come up for me.
Disabled tried to use Sing. Sing.
There was so much text it moved off the box itself. It was finally glitching out, I thought.
Disabled used Struggle. It struggled, and struggled, and struggled, and struggled.
With each struggle, Wigglytuff took more and more damage, though this time the wild Ponyta got hit more this time too.
The wild Ponyta fled.
I thought the fight was over, but the battle screen stayed up. I began mashing the buttons, thinking maybe it was going to talk again and I needed to press A or B. The screen faded and changed to the evolving screen. I couldn't speak. My heart sank and I felt my eyes water. The once normal Wigglytuff sprite was faded, its left ear was torn off and red pixel covered the broken end. Its tired eyes were pitch black and with a red dot to show its pupils. Even its mouth had red coming from it, like blood was dripping out.
Why can't I sing? Why? Can you sing?
Yes or no? I picked no, I just wanted this to end.
You're lying. You can sing. Give me your sing.
Yes or no? I hit no about 4 or 5 times. Sing, glitchy sound.
Sing.
The speakers let out a high-pitched screech, making me drop my DS to get away. I ran out of my room and called a friend. I couldn't touch the game after that. My friend came over, seeing as I could not hide the panic I was feeling. She laughed at me, but I told her I wasn't touching the game. She picked it up for me and looked at it, shaking her head as she turned it off and closed it. She handed it back to me. I think you broke it, she told me, leaving my room and heading for the living room. She stayed with me the rest of the day and night. I couldn't get that image out of my head. The next morning, with my friend sitting next to me, I put the Wigglytuff up for trade. I found someone that was offering a Cyndaquil in exchange for a Wigglytuff. I hit the button as hard as I could, wanting it to hurry up. The trade went through. I still have that Cyndaquil. Whoever had him named him Hurry. There are some Pokemon fans you can tell at a glance. I'm not talking about someone who's had enough knowledge of metagame strategies to win every battle, or can tell you the exact stats or move pool of any of the 600 odd Mons. I'm referring to those who grew up along with the Pokemon saga. For people like us, who played the games from all generations for years, it's easy to tell an original Pokemon cartridge when you see one, and so I did. It was a fresh Friday of autumn, the kind of days you can still go around in a t-shirt and shorts, but can already feel the chills of the middle season. My brother and I both owned a copy of Pokemon Platinum, but he had lost interest in the game after a while and had started to play with my cartridge. Not that I minded. As a Pokemon lover, he was almost as seasoned as I am, and he had never done idiotic things like overwriting my save file, releasing my team, or breaking my winning streak at the Battle Frontier. However, all of this meant we had a copy of Platinum too many. I was hoping to trade it in at some video game shop. I was just on my way there when I stumbled upon a group of kids playing with various Nintendo consoles. Brand new DSs mostly, but also a couple of old Game Boys that were in surprisingly good condition. Interested, I took a peek at one of them and saw he was playing Pokemon Emerald. I quickly struck up a conversation. His name was Franco, and it was obvious he was totally into Pokemon. He showed me his DS and Pokemon games collection. We chatted about Pokemon and other video games, had some battles, made a couple trades, and I didn't notice time was going by so fast until I noticed the sun was just about to set. It was too late to make it to downtown before the shops closed, and since it was the weekend, I'd have to wait for 3 days before they opened again. Without thinking, I complained about it to myself, and he must have heard me, because he said, "Actually, I'm missing Platinum version. Would you like to barter?" I didn't know what he had to offer, but I heard that sometimes you could find all kinds of rare stuff on Oblivious Kids, from rare trading cards to save files with promotional Pokemon. I considered his offer. He showed me a cartridge that made my heart skip a beat. The sticker was stained and partially peeled off, but the cartridge's translucent red color, and what little of it I could make out left no doubt. It was an original honest-to-God Ruby cartridge. I examined it closely. The Nintendo logo, seal of quality, and everything else seemed in order. If not for that ruined sticker, you could have said it was in mint condition. It particularly interested me because I had never played an original Pokemon Ruby game. When it came out, I was too impatient to wait until it was available in stores, so I had played it on an emulator. By the time I could buy it, I had already finished it, and I didn't feel like playing it again. I had bought Sapphire instead, just for the gist of playing a different game from the one I had emulated. But I digress. We quickly sealed the deal, and I came back home with my new possession. I left it in my room and went to have dinner, then went back to my room. When I found the cartridge, I found a crudely crown-drawed Groudon on the front, and the words Ruby version had been clumsily filled in with marker. My brother was just playing at his computer, playing dumb, with the crown and marker still on the desk in front of him, not too smart. But my revenge for this act of defacement would have to wait. I booted it up on my DS. Predictably enough, it had a saved game memorized. It was named, unsurprisingly, Franco. It had 7 badges and 80 or so hours of playtime. I selected the game and was treated to a completely white screen that blinded me for a second or so. Nothing else happened. I turned it off and back on and selected a new game. The introductory screen with Professor Birch went out as smooth and as normal as it could be. It must have been some glitch or so, I thought to myself. I played the saved file again, and I thought I could see something. Outlines of sprites, maybe a tree or two beyond the white screen. I couldn't focus on them much because my eyes would hurt if I stared at it for more than a few moments. I opened the menu and the team screen opened up as usual. I looked at his team. Nothing special. A Swellow, Blaziken, Linoon, and Sharpedo, all in their 40s to 50s. Thinking perhaps the white was a glitchy fog effect, I tried moving around to see if I would end up in a different area. Nothing. Hoping that with the backlight I would have a better chance at seeing things, I took the cartridge out and put it in my Game Boy Advanced SP. Sure enough, it was easier to see. The screen was still bright, but at least I could make out my surroundings. I was just outside of Little Root. Taken by a nostalgic feeling, I decided to visit the town, even though usually you don't have many reasons to do so. Perhaps a side effect of the bright screen, everything looked a little off. The green color of the grass and trees was slightly tendent to yellow, even though the main character's sprite and everything else seemed fine. A palette error as such. I was starting to regret buying a game in such bad condition, which was sure to have its fair share of glitches and other problems, but it was still playable, so I went on. The music was a bit slower than I remember, and slightly off-pitch. The character's movement was also slow and chunky, as if it was a PC game lagging from memory overload. It didn't trouble me that much. I knew I could expect all kinds of weird stuff from that old game. The NPCs that were walking around were slower, and when talked to, they would sometimes cut the conversation short after a sentence or two. I went up to my room and found it full of decorations, little rugs, a table, a chair, and dolls. He had obviously taken quite a lot of time furnishing it. Guessing I'd pick off where he left from, I had Swellow use Fly to get his Pseudopolis and get that last medal, but the Pseudopolis area was grayed out. Franco must have quit the game just after busting Team Magma's hideout. He must have been pretty young when he played the game, probably he didn't know how to reach it. I checked his Sharpedo and sure enough it didn't no dive, even though he had the HM. I was pretty surprised to see that this team was now at half HP except for Blaziken, which was at full health. I shrugged and assumed I was just too distracted to have noticed before. Deciding to take the long route around, I headed to Oldale first. I immediately entered the Pokemon Center, and the scene there was the oddest thing so far. There was a line of NPCs in front of the nurse's counter, and every few seconds the first one in the line would exit the building, and another would join the queue. That was weird. In the whole emulated playthrough of Ruby, I had never seen such a scene. Franco had probably found out some secret event or got a promo Pokemon that would trigger this. I felt excited. Even after all these years, there was something in a Pokemon game I had never seen. I still needed to heal my Pokemon though, so I had no choice but to join the queue and go along with them. When I finally reached the counter, I didn't even press A or anything. The nurse didn't say her usual welcome line, but just turned towards the Pokemon Center machine, placed the 4 Pokeballs in and healed them. After giving them back, she simply said, "Next," and I automatically moved to the left and down, just out of the way. I tried to talk to the other NPCs in the queue, but got no response. The escalator to the second floor wouldn't work. I checked the PC and looked at his boxes. As expected, all his Pokemon except the team he had on him were pretty much the same level at which he had caught them, which struck me as odd since he didn't even have a full team. Perhaps he was just challenging himself. I went to the Pokemart. There was a queue there too, although shorter than the one in the Pokemon Center. The goods selection wasn't the usual though. They were only selling Pokeballs and Burn Heals. The weirdest thing was that Burn Heal was incredibly expensive at 1,500 Pokédollars each. Damn, I thought, someone tampered with this cartridge, perhaps a Game Shark. As I went north and then east, I noticed the color palette was acting funny again. Where normally there would be green, there was a sickly greenish yellow, and the water was of a dimmer color as usual. When I surfed through it, quite predictably, I was attacked by wild Pokemon, mostly Wingull. What happened with the first battle caught me by surprise. The enemy Pokemon started the battle with only about half HP, something I never thought was possible in Pokemon. I sent out Sharpedo and noticed its HP wasn't at max, but slightly less. I couldn't think of any reason for that, even if he had somehow activated the so-called Acid Rain glitch, which caused continuous damage. I hadn't even ran into any battle up to there. I easily beat it with Crunch and went on. In the following battles, I noticed that even though I beat the wild Pokemon in one move without giving them a chance to attack, Sharpedo's health kept decreasing with every battle. I checked the team several times between battles, tried giving them healing items and berries, but their health kept slowly going down anyway. Even Blaziken, whom I thought was immune to that mysterious health sapping effect, was receiving damage only at a much slower pace. For such an old game, it sure had its share of oddities. I realized that at that pace, I would have to bring a lot of potions with me and stop at any Pokemon Center I had the chance of visiting, and that bothered me. I decided I would delete the save file eventually, as nothing was worth going on with such an unplayable file, but first I wanted to get to the bottom of it. I casually passed by one of the soft soil spots, those where you could plant berries. In it there was a row of plants, but their sprites weren't moving, and were in monochrome. As I approached them and examined them, they disappeared. In the text, "The Chesto berry crumbled to dust" appeared. Examining the soil again, it said, "This soil is too dry to plant anything." There was definitely something big going on, and apparently I was getting close to the source. I decided to get this over with and go straight to battle Wallace. I flew to Lily Cove, and suddenly I realized what was going on. The eerie 4-note melody and periodic flashes of the screen were those of when Groudon is let loose by Team Magma. When that happened, I'd gone straight to the Cave of Origins to battle it, and had no idea it could affect the rest of the world. But it just raised further questions after it sank in. Groudon was supposed to break loose after encountering it in the seafloor cave. How did Franco get there without dive? Or perhaps Groudon's drought could start threatening the world before even meeting it? Did it have to do with the game being left in that state for such a long time? From the game's point of view, the protagonist had seen the evil team depart on to awaken a legendary Pokemon, and instead of chasing after them, he did nothing, cowering away from his destiny, never resuming his voyage as a Pokemon trainer. Was I witnessing the result of such negligence? I decided to find out. I quickly opened the menu and taught the HM to Sharpedo. Just as I was selecting it, I had a start. Swellow had fainted. Without even a message or a warning, it had lost all of its HP. Frustrated, I went to the Pokemon Center. The queue was much longer than the one in Oldale, so much that it started outside of the building. It took me the good part of 15 minutes to have my team fixed. I went to the shop to buy some revives and potions just in case. Another queue, and the shop's prices were outrageous. Pokeballs and battle items were at normal price, but healing items cost 5 times as much as I remembered. With little more than 50,000 Pokédollars and no valuables to sell, I was only able to afford 2 revives and a handful of potions. I started surfing down Route 124. No trainers in sight, and even though I had used no repels, I only met 2 wild Tentacool on the rather long trip. Both of them only had about 1/4 of their maximum HP when the battle started. The screen was getting brighter and the flashes more frequent. My brother started peeking at my screen, curious. "You're gonna fight Groudon?" he asked. I replied with a distracted "uh-huh." I couldn't take my eyes off the game. I used Dive and entered the cave. The scene there shocked me. Instead of the water, there was an empty basin with some lava pools here and there. Grunts of both teams were lying on the ground along with the sprites of Poochyenas. Neither moved or gave response when talked to. I got to the bottom of the cave and Archie and Maxie were both there. Groudon wasn't. I approached Archie and a cutscene started. He slowly walked over the lava pool where Groudon was supposed to be. He turned around and said very slowly, "You were right. You should have stopped us, and now it's too late." Then, he jumped into the pool of lava and disappeared. Groudon's cry, very slight as if heard from a distance, could be heard. My brother was as dumbstruck as I was. Maxie was lying down like the grunts in the cave, no answer on him either. With no other idea of where to go, I headed to the Cave of Origin hoping to battle Groudon. As I approached Pseudopolis, I saw more and more sideways sprites of trainers as if they were floating corpses. They were even losing color more and more as I went on. The only wild Pokemon I encountered, a Magikarp, started the battle with just a sliver of HP and in burn status. Even before I sent out my Pokemon, it took damage from the burn and was defeated. No victory theme, the screen just went back to the map. Opening my menu, I saw that 3 of my Pokemon were low on HP and in burn status, and even Blaziken, although not burned, had taken quite a bit of damage. I dove and surfaced inside the crater. Pseudopolis didn't look anything like I remembered. Lava was pouring from the edges, pooling near the bottom. There were no signs of life, and charred buildings and fire blocked all ways but a very narrow path leading to the Cave of Origin. As soon as I was in front of it, a wall crumbled and a stream of lava covered the path I was just in a few steps before. I was trapped. Inside, oddly enough, I found two NPCs, Wallace lying on the ground and Wally. I was genuinely surprised to see Wally there, until it hit me that to get to Victory Road before you, he logically had to get all the badges, so he had no reason not to be there. I spoke to Wallace to no avail. When I tried to speak with Wally, he told me in a message which speed was even slower than that of Archie. Everyone tried and failed. It's just the two of us left. Will you help me? The screen shook, and a tile of lava appeared in front of the entrance. Wally hobbled down the stairs. I healed my team the best I could with my meager supplies and followed him. I found him in front of Groudon. The room was littered with charred trainer and Pokémon sprites. Among them were familiar sprites. I recognized Watson and May on top of a pile, and Norman was laying face down in the middle of the room. I walked up to Groudon and the battle started. It was me and Wally against it. Bullshit, my brother cried from behind me. This game's a fake. There were no team-up battles before Emerald. I ignored him and went on. Groudon was at full health and on level 90. The message, Groudon's drought made the sun shine brightly, appeared as soon as the battle started. My sprite and Wally's flashed as if they were Pokemon taking damage. I felt something hot trickling down my fingers. I checked the back of the console. The crown of the cartridge had melted. The cartridge itself had gotten almost too hot to touch, and the faint smell of burnt paper came from what was left of the sticker. We couldn't find any logical reason for that. Curiosity got the better of me and I started the battle. I sent out Sharpedo and Wally opened with a level 40 Magneton. It made sense. It was close to the level of the one he has when encountered in the Victory Road. It was severely weakened like the wild Pokemon I had met earlier. Groudon used Earthquake, leaving Sharpedo with very little HP and knocking out Magneton in one hit. Sharpedo used Surf, but in spite of it being super effective, it only took away a small chunk of health. The battle was extremely one-sided. It swept through my team easily, as well as Wally's Swablu, Delcatty, and Gardevoir. Even outnumbering it 2-1, the difference in level and weakened state of our teams were too much of a disadvantage. As soon as Gardevoir had fallen, Wally's sprite took its place, and the same happened to me as soon as Swellow was knocked out. There were no HP bars or anything, and there was nothing to do. Groudon automatically got the next turn and used Flamethrower on Wally, making him faint. I braced for whatever's about to come, but nothing could prepare me for what happened after. The screen flashed an orange-red tint so bright that I cried in pain as I instinctively closed my eyes. At the same time, I felt a searing pain in my hand, forcing me to drop the console. It hit the ground and the cartridge popped right out. The plastic around the cartridge slot had partially melted. The cartridge itself was completely unharmed. My head felt heavy and I fell back on my bed and lost consciousness. When we woke up the morning after, my brother was dizzy and complained of a headache. I had gotten the worst of it. I had a blistering burn on my hand and something like a nasty sunburn on my face. Knowing I would have been called crazy if I told what happened, I told my friends I had an accident while cooking a barbecue. It took 2 weeks for me to heal completely. Some days after, against my better judgment, I decided to give that cartridge one last look. First of all, I deleted that damn save file. I sure felt relieved after I saw the only option was New Game, but that only lasted until I selected it. There was no introduction, no speech from the professor, no prompt to name my character. The screen went directly to the initial scene in Littleroot with the van in front of the house, but there was no one, no characters, no NPCs, and I couldn't open the menu. Trying to move around just moved the camera. Upon trying to leave the town on any side, I would see a white border, on the other side of which was a featureless gray land. Eventually the map started zooming out. Somehow the town got smaller and smaller. Eventually I could see that it was not the actual Littleroot, but a photo, left in the middle of a patch of scorched ground. Then more things started to enter the field of view. A broken Pokeball, charred wood, rusty metal, stains of dried mud, and what I initially thought to be black and yellowish pebbles, but I soon found out were charred bones, from a skeleton partially burned in the ash. I couldn't bear to see any of that anymore. I tore the cartridge out of the console. I tossed that cartridge in my closet, hoping to never have to see it again. I'm still friends with Franco, and I never mentioned the game to him at all, and he didn't to me either. He was oblivious to the fact that his ignorance and negligence had doomed a world, albeit a virtual one. A couple months later, I looked in the closet for that cartridge again, but I couldn't find it. My mom had probably misplaced it when sorting through my clothes, and maybe I'll never see it again. Perhaps that's for the best. I'm what you could call a collector of bootleg Pokemon games, Pokemon Diamond and Jade, Chaos Black, etc. It's amazing the frequency in which you can find them at pawn shops, Goodwill, flea markets, and such. They're generally fun even if they're unplayable, which they often are. The mistranslations and poor quality make them unintentionally hilarious. I've been able to find most of the ones that I've played online, but there's one that I haven't seen any mention of. I bought it at a flea market about 5 years ago. Here's a picture of the cartridge in case anyone recognizes it. Unfortunately, when I moved 2 years ago, I lost the game, so I can't provide you with any screen caps. The game started with the familiar Nidorino and Gengar intro of Red and Blue version. However, the press start screen had been altered. Red was there, but the Pokemon didn't cycle through. It also said Black version under the Pokemon logo. Upon selecting New Game, the game started the Professor Oak speech, and it quickly became evident that the game was essentially Pokemon Red. After selecting your starter, if you looked at your Pokemon, you had an addition to Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle, another Pokemon named Ghost. The Pokemon was level 1. It had the sprite of the ghosts that are encountered in Lavender Town before obtaining the Sylph Scope, and it only had one attack, Curse. I know that there's a real move named Curse, but the attack did not exist in Generation 1, so it appears that it was hacked in. Defending Pokemon were unable to attack Ghost. It would only say they were too scared to move. When the move Curse was used in battle, the screen would cut to black. The cry of the defending Pokemon would be heard, but it was distorted, played at a much lower pitch than normal. The battle screen would then reappear, and the defending Pokemon would be gone. If used in a battle against a trainer, when the Pokeballs representing their Pokemon would appear in the corner, they would have one fewer Pokeball. The implication was that the Pokemon died. What's even stranger is that after defeating a trainer and seeing Red received 200 for winning, the battle commands would appear again. If you selected Run, the battle would end as it normally does. You could also select Curse, and if you did, upon returning to the overworld, the trainer's sprite would be gone. After leaving and re-entering the area, the spot where the trainer had been would be replaced with a tombstone like the ones at Lavender Tower. The move Curse was not usable in all instances. It would fail against ghost Pokemon. It would also fail if it was used against trainers that you would have to face again, such as your rival or Giovanni. It was usable if your final battle against them, however. I figured this was the gimmick of the game, allowing you to use the previously uncapturable ghosts, and because Curse made the game so easy, I essentially used it throughout the whole adventure. The game changed quite a bit after defeating the Elite Four. After viewing the Hall of Fame, which consisted of Ghost and a couple of Pokemon I used for HMs, the screen cut to black. A box appeared with the words, "Many years later," and then cut to Lavender Town. An old man was standing looking at tombstones. You then realized the man was your character. The man moved at only half of your normal walking speed. You no longer had any Pokemon with you, not even Ghost, who up to this point had been impossible to remove from your party. The overworld was entirely empty. There were no people at all. There were still the tombstones of the trainers that you used Cursed on. You could go pretty much anywhere in the overworld at this point, though your movement was limited by the fact that you had no Pokemon to use HMs, and regardless of where you went, the music of Lavender Town continued on an infinite loop. After wandering for a while, I found that if you go through Diglett Cave, one of the cuttable bushes that normally blocks the path on the other side is no longer there, allowing you to advance and return to Pallet Town. Upon entering your house and going to the exact tile where you start the game, the screen would cut to black. Then a sprite of Caterpie appeared. It was then replaced by Weedle and then Pidgey. I soon realized as the Pokemon progressed from Rattata to Blastoise that these were all the Pokemon I had used Curse on. After the end of my rival's team, a youngster appeared, and then a bug catcher. These were the trainers I had cursed. Throughout the sequence, the Lavender Town music was playing, but it was slowly decreasing in pitch. By the time your rival appeared on screen, it was little more than a demonic rumble. Another cut to black. A few moments later, the battle screen suddenly appeared. Your trainer sprite was now that of an old man, the same one as the one who teaches you how to catch Pokemon in Viridian City. Ghost appeared on the other side, along with the words,
Ghost wants to fight.
You couldn't use items, and you had no Pokemon. If you tried to run, you couldn't escape. the only option was to fight. Using fight would immediately cause you to struggle, which didn't affect Ghost, but did chip off a bit of your own HP. When it was Ghost's turn to attack, it would simply say nothing, and eventually your HP reached a critical point, Ghost would finally use Curse. The screen cut to black a final time. Regardless of the buttons you pressed, you were permanently stuck in this black screen. At this point, the only thing you could do was turn the Game Boy off. When you played again, New Game was the only option. The game had erased the file. I played through this hacked game many times, and every time the game ended with this sequence. Several times I didn't use Ghost at all, though he was impossible to remove from the party. In these cases, it did not show any Pokemon or trainers and simply cut to the climactic battle with Ghost. I'm not sure what the motives were behind the creator of this hack, and it wasn't widely distributed, so it was presumably not for monetary gain. It was very well done for a bootleg. It seems he was trying to convey a message. Though it seems I am the sole receiver of this message, I'm not entirely sure what it was. The inevitability of death? The pointlessness of it? Perhaps he was simply trying to morbidly inject death and darkness into a children's game. Regardless, this children's game had made me think, and it had made me cry.